All right, as advertised, we're welcoming back to the podcast. Love that we have this like awesome carousel of recurring guests from all over the country. RJ Ochoa. Let me try to get this resume right, even though we've had him on before. He covers all things Dallas Cowboys for Blogging the Boys. He's also the host of the Ocho Live podcast. I've actually listened to it, believe it or not, even though it is dealing with the Cowboys, which is not my forte. He's the co-host of the Saturday Morning Hangover on ESPN San Antonio. RJ, welcome back to the show. Thanks so much for taking the time.
It's great to be back, guys. I'm enjoying it. You guys moved the furniture around, so it feels good.
I mean, yeah, the furniture has been moved around in that dimly lit basement. That's true. You have a very keen eye, RJ. Let's get into it, Wolf. Ask your questions.
Let's get right back into the football stuff. So obviously Dez Bryant and Jason Witten are gone, so the Cowboys look a lot different from when we last chatted last year, RJ. But this is obviously true of the passing game with 272 targets and 2,645 air yards available. But before we go into that and all the new faces, how that might be filled out, we got one remaining staple, the engine of this offense, Ezekiel Elliott. I have him all the way up at number 2 on my big board, and I'm obviously expecting a monster season out of him. But how is he looking in camp? Is his role kind of expected to evolve at all in this rehauled attack? What are you seeing from Zeke this year?
Well, I think, let's get the elephant out of the room, done right away. I mean, last year was weird for Zeke. It was weird for Zeke and it was weird for the Cowboys. And, try as you might, I don't think anybody, that's gone through anything like that is able to completely suppress it. And so, yeah, I mean, last year was really weird for Zeke. So I think right off the bat, it feels a lot more like his rookie season. The hype, their excitement, there's not that just that sort of demerit floating around. And so that's a big thing for me personally in terms of my evaluation. But Zeke's looked great. Zeke has looked fantastic. A lot of people, it feels like fat Zeke is just like a thing that people look for. People try to, find angles to where he looks large. And he doesn't, he doesn't help that narrative. I think he tends to work out in practice in all sorts of hoodies and layers. And nobody looks good in layers. And so, but ultimately he looks great. And he looks great and he seems great. And his greatest weapon, I mean, if he's the engine, outside element of the car, so to speak, is the Cowboys offensive line. And it was fortified with the drafting of Connor Williams. So there's nothing but reason and optimism for me when it comes to Zeke.
And how about in the passing game? Like we mentioned, there's tons of targets available. And that's one of the reasons I moved him up to number 2 is I'm hoping for that type of the Todd Gurley jump that he made last year. Maybe Zeke. He's always been a great pass protector. Have you seen any more hints that he might be more involved in the passing game at all?
Yeah, just watching them out at training camp, there were times, there were moments, and I don't know that the Cowboys want to, really go far down that road, and I think we can all understand why. You want to be protective of Zeke, but I don't think there's any doubt that Zeke can perform well in the passing game, and I certainly believe that Zeke will be more involved in the passing game than he's ever been. And that's not a big stretch of the imagination, of course, because he's so infrequently involved, but I mean, when I think of Zeke in the passing game, I think of 2 plays, and it's really easy. But I think of the screenplay he took to the house in Pittsburgh his rookie season, and I think of the same exact play that he did against the San Francisco 49ers last season. In fact, he did a diagnosing of that play for DallasCowboys.com, so it was really cool to kind of hear him set up why it worked and why it was successful. But Zeke has that potential, and the Cowboys have the offensive line to get out in space and block out for him well beyond the second layer. I definitely believe that he's going to be more involved. Is he going to be Todd Gurley or Marshall Faulk for that matter? I know that there's some report that Zeke's studying him. I don't know. I don't think so. But I definitely think that volume is going to increase.
Wow. I think we should make a pact right now on this podcast that we're not going to call him Fat Zeke ever again. We're going to call him Layered Zeke. That was a great take on that. Layered Zeke. He's wearing layers. Zeke, cut out the layers. You're making yourself an easy target.
Yeah, it's like, around wintertime, I like to rock the long sleeve shirt under a sweater look so the collar pops out, but it just, makes everybody look hefty. It's a rough life.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We should, onions have layers. Zeke's like an onion. Anyway, let's get right back into the interview. Indeed, Zeke, our obvious mainstay for the Dallas offense. The rest of the offense is a kind of a mystery. I'm baffled by it personally. That's why I'm so pumped that you're going to be on the show, because you have so much more information than we do. Has there been any particular wide receiver that has stood out I mean, is it going to be the Allen Hurns show? That's hard for me to fathom, but maybe that's what it's going to be. What do you expect from this pass catching core? Are there going to be any viable options amongst them, or is this just a must miss?
I'll say personally that I wouldn't go down this road from a fantasy perspective, although I am in a couple of deeper leagues, so maybe there.
Yeah.
But the one guy that has stood out to me, I mean, to use that verbiage, has been Tavon Austin. And again, I mean, I wouldn't draft him in my league of record or anything, but Tavon has been all over the place. He's been inside, he's been outside, he's finally gotten used out of the backfield. He's been a leader. He's been loud. He's been vocal. I mean, he's made big plays in every capacity. And so I certainly expect him to be involved in this offense and to help them win football games. But from a fantasy perspective, I'm intrigued. It's like the appetizer that you didn't want to order that your friends wanted to eat. And so you're just kind of like, oh, I guess the food's here. I'll poke at it.
You're picking at it.
Yeah, exactly.
What about
there's been some great analogies. We're early in this interview, and there's been some great analogies already. So keep it coming.
Christmas sweaters, appetizers that you didn't want to eat. I love it all. Yeah,
he's the nachos of the fantasy league.
One guy I was intrigued by, and just because it literally just happened this week on the preseason game, was Gallup. That 30-yard touchdown, he looked like he beat the defense well and some good chemistry with Dak. Is he seeing a good amount of first-team reps? Was that just because other guys were hurt and not playing? Is there any chance that rookie emerges there?
Yeah, he has been seeing some first-team work, and a lot of it, and to your point, has been Allen Hurns got a vet day here. Cole Beasley got a vet day there. And so Michael Gallup's certainly gotten his opportunity at training camp. And, yeah, I mean, he was explosive in the preseason. And people liken him to Stephon Diggs. They liken him to Michael Thomas. And when you hear those names, especially in the fantasy realm, you get excited. I think there's, if I was drafting, I mean, yeah, he's worth a late-round flyer. But I don't know that I'd want him to be in my first sort of 4 wide receivers. I want to build a stable and then kind of take a lotto chance on a guy like Michael Gallup. But I think it's one that could definitely pay off.
Right, yeah, that's exactly what we talk about, building your stables in those first 8 rounds, all running backs, all receivers, then the penny stocks later. So that's where we're getting at with the Cowboys receivers. Maybe he could be a penny stock. What about a tight end then? Obviously a gap with Jason Witten there. We've been kind of building this affinity for, we call it the creature named Blake Jarwin. Is he the guy that could make a fantasy impact? Is there anybody worth noting there?
Well, I'll say, first of all, that I wouldn't dabble in the Cowboys tight ends personally. And I don't even know the last year that I had Jason Witten on any fantasy team, which makes me sad. But I will say that there is a huge infatuation for Blake Jarwin within the Cowboys. For people that aren't aware, Kellen Moore, the quarterback they kept on their team forever, was somebody who, I mean, they were not going to let go. I mean, it took some serious vice grips on the outside for them to finally let go of Kellen Moore, and he's now their quarterback's coach. But last year, in the middle of the season, the Philadelphia Eagles were going to poach Blake Jarwin off the Cowboys practice squad. So they got wind of that, and they finally said, okay, Kellen, we finally found that point where we're willing to sacrifice you. And they released Kellen Moore, promoted Blake Jarwin. They got Kellen Moore back on the practice squad. And, it's an interesting little domino, because if that doesn't happen, do the Eagles trade up to draft, ironically, Dallas Goedert? I mean, so I do know that the Cowboys love Blake Jarwin. I don't believe he's a viable fantasy project, though.
Very interesting. So we don't got a ton of great receivers. We don't got a ton of great tight ends here. Is there any hope for Dak? This weapon cabinet just seems so barren this year. We have him pretty low at QB 24 as compared to QB 19, and his ADP is QB 17. So we're a bit lower than the industry. Are we wrong to be low on him? I mean, how's he looking?
There's a wide range on Dak. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, we have him down at 24, but I've seen some people that actually are strangely high on Dak, and I can't figure out why. So I'm actually
we had Field Yates on last week. He had him at 10.
Yeah, well, right. I didn't want to misquote, but yeah. So RJ, what do you think about him?
Well, you mentioned Field Yates. I think it was in the draft day manifesto from Matthew Berry. I think that's where I read that Dak had 6 touchdowns. I'm going to butcher this, so don't quote me on it.
No, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it was like he had 6 touchdowns from like 15 yards out or plus, something like that. Like it was a certain range from outside that. He had 6 rushing touchdowns, and no running back surpassed that.
Right,
only Dak, accomplished that. So, if you're looking for a reason to believe in Dak Prescott from a fantasy perspective, I think that's it. I think Dak, doesn't get the credit for, your average running quarterbacks in a fantasy lens, but I think that he's capable of that. I don't know that the Cowboys want him to do that, but if I had to, if I ended up with Dak Prescott after my draft, that would be what I would be telling myself. To say, hey, this guy runs a lot, but I think that there are definitely other guys I'd rather have. I mean QB10 feels a little optimistic from a fantasy perspective. I want to make sure I say that because people will freak out. But I could probably think of 12, 13 guys I'd rather have on my fantasy team than Dak.
Sure. All right. Well, let's talk about actual football for a second. I know that's a novel concept, but given that this is the part of the divisional preview series, we got to get your predictions for the actual season. So we're gonna take a break from fantasy just for a second. What do you see the Cowboys doing in 2018? Where do you see them finishing in the division? What do you think about their record? And just in general, how do you see the division shaking out? Because we're actually going to talk to a Giants guy in just a few minutes.
Well, I'll say that I'll start negatively first, and I'll say that it's potentially a situation where the worst thing that ever happened to the Cowboys was Zeke's suspension, and that sounds obvious, but I think that has so many layers to go back to that because, if you're the Cowboys, I think it's possible that they looked at last season and said, man, you know what, we would have been fine. That Zeke thing, we got the raw end of that deal. If that suspension had never come down, if he doesn't miss those 6 games, we would have been fine. We would have won at least 3 more games. We would have been in the playoffs, et cetera. And you can really kind of talk yourself into an alternate reality if you go down that hypothetical. But being optimistic here, and I think being somewhat realistic, Zeke is slated to be there for 16 games. Dak is a quarterback who played incredibly well for the first half of last season. And, it all really broke. And I know this is obvious in Atlanta. And it all broke because Zeke was suddenly gone. Sean Lee left the game extremely early. Tyron Smith was gone. And they were going up against a team in the Atlanta Falcons that at the time were the reigning NFC champions. And so it all just, hit the fan at one point, and it was probably too much to overcome emotionally. I think, it was easy to kind of feel beat up. Oh, Zeke's gone, Sean's gone, Tyron's gone, et cetera. But that specific game kicked off a stretch. They lost in Atlanta. They lost at home to Philly the following week in what was the worst loss ever at AT&T Stadium. They lost on Thanksgiving to the Los Angeles Chargers. In those 3 games, the Cowboys failed to break double digits in all 3 of them. It's the only time in Dallas Cowboys history that they scored single digits in 3 consecutive games. And so, this is a team that won 9. They won 9 football games in spite of that last year. And so, if you take away something that is literally the lowest of low that they ever reached as a franchise, and you add some pieces that you like, you add a Leighton Vander Esch in the first round, I think it's conceivable that they win 10, 11 games. The Eagles are obviously going to be good. I think this is a team that wins 10 games. I think they're a wild card team. And, I think poetically maybe they go back to Atlanta in the wild card round to kind of exercise, that moment that broke them in 2017.
What about the rest of the division? How do you see it then finalizing? Who's going to be at the top, and then who's at the bottom?
Well, I think the Giants are at the bottom, and whoever you're talking to, you can tell them I said that against my will. I was really bummed about having to say that, but the Redskins are so interesting because Alex Smith, he's not a dude who gets waxed. Alex Smith isn't. You're not going to be doing your Christmas shopping rooting for Alex Smith's team with your team completely out of the picture. So Alex Smith's going to keep the Redskins interesting, although obviously the Darius injury is a bit of a bummer. And the Eagles, they're the Super Bowl champions. I'm a big believer that you're the best team in the world until you're not. And so they're going to be very good, but the NFL is an ever-changing, ever-evolving organism. And so, to go back to Atlanta, they were the only team of the 6 that went to the playoffs in 2017 on the NFC side that went back, in 2016. And so I think, the Eagles are public enemy number 1. That's just the territory that comes with winning the Super Bowl. And so I think it's going to be a tough road. If I had to pick a division winner, I'd lean there out of logic. But I wouldn't be shocked if the Cowboys, give them some hay. But I am particularly excited for the Cowboys game in Philadelphia this year. In the Dak Zeke era, they've only gone to Philadelphia in their 2 regular season finales, and both of those had no meaning because the Cowboys and Eagles had already secured the number 1 overall seed. So we have never seen a Dak Zeke Cowboys game in Philadelphia that matters. And this year it's on Sunday Night Football, so I'm pretty pumped about that.
All right, so Eagles, Cowboys, Washington, Giants, and Eagles, Cowboys both going to the playoffs. You heard it here first, folks, from RJ Ochoa. RJ, you got a couple minutes so we can do our no-huddle rapid-fire questions to end things up?
Of course.
Okay. All right. First question, and some of these are going to really make you think. Who should go number 1 overall in the fantasy draft?
Oh, man, I'd probably go Zeke. Actually, if we're doing redraft leagues, I'd probably go Le'Veon Bell just because they're going to run the tires off him.
All right. Wolf?
Fair enough. Give us your most undervalued player at each position. So quarterback, running back, receiver, and tight end.
From a fantasy perspective, quarterback's probably Matt Ryan, as weird as that is. Like, it feels like he's no longer the sexy guy. And if I didn't go Matt Ryan, I might go Kirk Cousins, although he's kind of picked up a little bit of sex appeal, obviously changing teams. Mm-hmm. At running back, I think a lot of people forget just what Christian McCaffrey is supposed to be for the Panthers. And this really kind of makes me feel that, the NFC South is such a fantasy-rich division. At receiver, I mean, that is such an interesting one. I feel like I always get a value on some guy. And I feel like Keenan Allen will be that guy this year. People are going to be so spooked by his injury history, and those are some dice I'm willing to roll. So I think you're able to get him because people, I think, are going to lean Devontae Adams and, DeAndre Hopkins, and those are all great receivers and probably should be ranked ahead of him, but they're all going to take all those guys ahead of Keenan Allen, and I'll probably go with him. At tight end, man, that is such a crapshoot. I'll drink the Gatorade as of like the Kool-Aid, so to speak. I'll go David Njoku because I feel like he's going to be a big playmaker for the Browns. And at kicker, because I feel like throwing one in, I'll go Dan Bailey because Dan Bailey's the man.
Dude, you just get so much extra credit for the fact that you tacked a kicker on there. Like, you didn't have to. That was just extra, and we appreciate it.
Hey, they score points.
It's true.
I had Blair Walsh in 2012 when he scored 25 fantasy points that helped me win a championship that year. So I will never forget that.
I lost a gut-wrenching game last year because of someone's kicker. I'm still mad about it. Most overvalued player at each position. Do the same thing you just did, but let's get a little negative.
Overvalued, I think at quarterback it might be Aaron Rodgers. Just because he has this name recognition and people associate him, and I don't think the drop off is that great from Aaron Rodgers, even to Alex Smith, for example, from a fantasy perspective. So I'll go Aaron Rodgers there. At running back, I would say this year it's going to be Todd Gurley because I don't know how Todd Gurley just does it again. But I also, to go back to an underrated sort of thing, I always think of Devonta Freeman when I think of Todd Gurley. I don't know why I've always kind of compared the two. I would rather take Devonta Freeman, in the second round if he lasts that long than have to spend my first round pick on Todd Gurley. I feel that way this year. It's a weird little feeling. At receiver, it's probably I actually don't think Antonio Brown's overrated. I know it's a small little opinion, but he's just that good. It might be Julio, honestly, as weird as that sounds. This is a hard game. And at tight end, it's probably Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce's a little overrated.
And so what early round draft picks, so round through 1 through 3, is going to ruin a fantasy season this year?
Oh, man, that is, it's obviously going to be something that's, I don't want to go injury related. That feels way too negative.
Yeah. Right.
I think, somebody's going to buy in off of last year, and I think it's probably Alvin Kamara. And I love Alvin Kamara, and he's so great. He's so interesting. And it's easy to talk yourself into, Mark Ingram suspended for the first part of the season, et cetera. But, I just feel like if he falls back down to earth, so to speak, we haven't even really seen what earth is for him, you're going to have to spend a premium pick to get him. And so I think that Alvin Kamara could be the pick that sort of wrecks your season early on. I remember one year I took Stephen Ridley in the second round when he was with the Pats, and I was so stoked, and it just broke me for the whole year.
All right, we call them penny stocks. Most folks call them late round lottery tickets, flyers, whatever. Give us one or two guys that you want to try to get late in the draft.
Well, he's doing nothing except hurting his stock these days. But Antonio Callaway is a really popular one, obviously, for the Browns. I think he has a lot of potential, certainly. I think Michael Gallup's a great name if you're trying to, get some sort of scratch-off going your way. People kind of forget that Mohamed Sanu exists. Mohamed Sanu exists, and he's in an offense that's really great. And they added Calvin Ridley, so they forget even more. Mohamed Sanu's a guy that's just, even when he was with the Bengals, he's a guy he's going to have that 1 week where he scores like 27 points, and you tell yourself that he's this legitimate receiver. He's not, but he's worth having. He makes your team look good.
Interesting. So the single most important fantasy move that an owner can make in 2017
or 2018
or 2018, yeah, sorry, is
I think the single most important move, I think people get wrapped up in the technicalities of things. They look and they say, oh man, I got to make sure all of my bye weeks, don't coincide. So in that vein, Because that's how my league of record is. My cousin's always like that, and I value that he's like that because it makes him a worse player, which I benefit from. But I think it's as simple as it sounds. The best thing you can do is look at it as a week-to-week game. I mean, you got to win this week, and then you got to win next week. But you can't worry about it. You can't say, oh, man, I need to make this trade this week because I'm preparing for next week. There's certainly value and there's logic to looking and planning ahead, but it doesn't matter, and it's a moot point if you don't win the week at hand, which is something that people overlook sometimes.
All right, this is where this is an important one. I had to fight to get this one into the rundown, but I really want to know the answer. If your life depended on it and you had to give maximum effort on this, how many hot dogs and buns could you eat in 10 minutes?
In 10, oh man,
4th of July, Coney Island style. Like if you had to do it.
This is a great question.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So I'm glad that you squeezed it in. I feel like I would average 2 a minute. That feels conservative. I feel like I sort of 2 a minute with a plus minus, 5 across 10 minutes. So I feel like I could probably, sort of with my life depending on it, say I'd knock down 22. I feel like that's possible.
That is not bad. You wouldn't be far probably off the podium, at least the big stage at Coney Island if you can do that. So if this whole Cowboys beat reporter thing doesn't work out, possibly the competitive eating circuit. I said 7, just for the record.
you could. That 7 is easy. You would knock that out with so much time left.
I mean, with my life on the line, possibly I would be really motivated and I could do more. But 22, that's impressive, and I appreciate you taking the question seriously because I really did want to know.
He's been trying to get that one on for years. And
it's a good thing. It's a good thing. And honestly, I don't really like hot dogs. I was actually at Cowboys camp. We went to a Dodgers game, and I had a Dodger dog. Forget who's overrated. Hot dogs are overrated. They're not good. They were never good. I would eat them if my life were on the line, but it's not. It's like it's a terrible food. I don't like hot dogs.
Yeah, it wouldn't be my first choice to competitively eat either.
And so to wrap this up, give us your boldest prediction for the 2018 season, and then just kind of a reminder of where our listeners can find you.
I feel like a lot of people's bold predictions, not necessarily on this show, people are going to be like, oh, the Browns are going to make the playoffs, et cetera, blah, blah. I think as a bold prediction, I think the Los Angeles Chargers are going to go further, define that however you will, than the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams have all this noise. They have all this talk. They have all this jibber jabber, et cetera. The Chargers, are charging it up. Hunter Henry, everybody's hurt. But somehow, some way, the Chargers just kind of, they do it. There's that 1 year, and it would be so Charger to be the Jan of LA, which they are, and to be the most successful team in that market and have nobody care. So I'll say that they go farther than the Rams, and that at their peak and most important game of the season, whether it's Week 17 or a playoff game, whatever, that they still don't even sell out that 30,000-seat venue, just because at the end of the day, they're still the Chargers. And if you want to find me, you can on Twitter at RJ Ochoa. You can catch all my work at bloggingtheboys.com and hanging out with my pals right here on the show.
RJ, it has been a genuine pleasure. Thanks for coming on the show again. I can't wait to do it again.
Anytime, my dudes. Tell that Giants guy I hope they don't win a single game.
Done.
We'll send in the word. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again, RJ. Much appreciated.
Y'all have a good one, guys.
Later.
See.